Hello, people. So I'm just going to kill maybe 30 seconds while some of you fill in to this impromptu live chat. But as you know, I often do impromptu live chats when the spirit moves me, when there's something that needs to be said, when my penetrating analysis just cannot wait because the world needs to hear it in all its glory. Okay, so I'm assuming that most of you probably saw this clip that was released last night, which finally gives us the audio of the exchange that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren had on the debate stage on Tuesday. And let's just talk a little bit about the mechanics behind this, because this was released about 24 hours later, 24 hours after the debate, that is. And CNN, when they published it, tried to make it seem like this was some amazing scoop that they obtained. Anderson Cooper himself actually used the word obtained when he aired the clip. And I also saw that they used the phrase dug up, like they had to go to extraordinary lengths to find this audio clip, which was recorded by CNN microphones on a CNN debate stage. Right? So they're trying to make it seem like this was some impressive act of journalistic intrepidness for them to have found this clip, which was obviously immediately available to them from the beginning. Which, again, causes you to wonder if this entire affair was not highly coordinated between Warren and CNN. Even if they didn't plan out every little step of it, it's obvious what the machinations were here, right? So you don't want to be overly conspiratorial and say that there was like a secret meeting where they specifically plotted out each little step in the way that this hit job was orchestrated. But I mean, you're kind of stupid if you still believe that this was just a series of crazy coincidences, right? So if you, for some reason, haven't seen it, I'm just going to play it here on off my phone, which I know is not the greatest quality when I'm on a stream, but it'll have to do.
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
What?
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
Let's not do it right now. You want to have that discussion? We'll have that
Anytime.
discussion. You called me a liar. You told me. All right, let's not do it now.
I don't want to get in the middle. I just want to say hi, Bernie.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Okay, so you can hear that. I mean, the funny part is him just totally shooing off Tom Steyer there. It's just like, why is Tom Steyer even there in the first place? But think about what Warren did. She knew the cameras were on her. She knew they were mic'd up. She knew that this was still airing. She's a professional politician who has now done many of these debates. So it's not like she's this naive newcomer, right? No. She walked right on stage. She made a beeline for Bernie and accused him of lying about her, or calling her a liar, rather. And that antagonized and provoked Bernie into saying, no, you called me a liar. And it's now all out there for the public to consume. And they waited 24 hours to put it out to keep the news cycle going. Because ideally, when you orchestrate a hit job like this, you want it to be extended over a period of days. You want to maximize the length of time that it is an issue. So, yeah, I mean, I now see political reporters. I'm not going to name names just because don't need any drama, but if you're a discerning user of Twitter, you can figure it out. Who are trying to absolve Warren of intentionality here. They're trying to make it seem like there was just this series of unfortunate events. Remember that book series for children? And this is really a childlike explanation for what went on here. I've already laid out in detail the steps and the sequencing that led up to this orchestrated attack that really, make no mistake, and I hate to use that cliched politician phrase, but make no mistake, I'm even going to wave my hand like a politician. Make no mistake, this was an attempt to destroy Bernie's candidacy, right? So even if you don't even like Bernie, even if you're really afraid about how he's going to implement gulags or something, which is, of course, nonsense, but let's say that's even your mindset, you should still watch with some consternation as a rival candidate coordinates and orchestrates with a corporate media outlet to destroy him. I mean, that has significance beyond whatever you may or may not think of Bernie, right? So, even if any Trump supporters are watching or whatever, it's still worth following this and realizing what it says about how establishment factions coalesce to nuke the political prospects of somebody they deem to be a threat. And you know, so I mean, I always had a feeling this was going to escalate, but if you had asked me a year ago, and I actually talked about this on Breitbart Radio last night, they asked me to come on and just talk about the latest happenings, and I'll do pretty much any media, so it was actually somewhat interesting. But one thing that has occurred to me is that if you had said a year ago, right, that Warren is going to resort to far, far, far sleazier tactics against Bernie than Hillary ever could have dreamed of, you would have been laughed out of the room by a lot of these so-called independent progressive media types who have been touting Warren as the staunchest and most reliable Bernie ally, right? While in the time they mock and denigrate Tulsi at every opportunity, where, of course, as expected, Tulsi actually weighed in defense of Bernie once more, just as she did in 2016 when she put her career on the line to support him. But all that kind of got lost in the fray as some of these not so smart progressive media commentators decided to tell their audiences that Warren was going to be somehow a reliable quote unquote progressive. And I don't even like that term anymore because it's so diluted of any meaning. So like if you are so credulous that you can sit there and watch Warren's ambush, which was obviously done consciously, knowing it was going to be recorded and then disseminated by the media within a matter of hours or even a day later in order to extend this news cycle, then you gotta probably wise up because this is pretty obvious for anybody who is not already indebted to somehow furthering the narrative that is preferred by Warren. And there are many people in the media who want to maintain access to her and will make it out as though this is some kind of again, just series of unfortunate events. Now, another thing that has also occurred to me is that there are these progressive groups, and again, I don't even really identify so much with these groups anymore because I hate the progressive branding. Like when I was on the Young Turks, everybody would try to outdo each other for who is the most progressive, and it just always seemed to me like it became this fundamentally meaningless semantic competition. So I have just dispatched with the label. I mean, if I support some quote unquote progressive policies, then yeah, I'll let that stand on its own. You can assess that for whether you think it's legitimate, but I'm not going to run around screaming how progressive I am and how not progressive you are. Because I feel like that term just obscures more than it reveals at this point. But you have this sort of network of progressive advocacy groups and pundits who are demanding. They're like they're in like emergency containment mode, crisis containment mode, and they're saying, "Oh, the progressives need to unite. We have to stop this fighting, and we need to get together and make sure we have unity to win the nomination and then beat Trump." And it's just like, what are you talking about? So Sunrise Movement, Our Revolution, Justice Democrats, Working Families Party, Democracy for America, Roots Action. These are some big, progressive groups, some of which have endorsed Bernie, some of which endorsed Warren, all of whom have professional aspirations to remain in the good graces of whoever might win the Democratic nomination. So there's a professional careerist incentive here for them to be saying this. So bear that in mind when it seems like their analysis is not quite perceptive. It's perceptive, but it's for their own self-interest, right? So they're saying our best chance of defeating Trump does not lie with an establishment or corporate Democrat. The anti-establishment, anti-corporate awareness and anger that characterize American society today are justified, and it would be a huge mistake to once again yield that ground to a phony like Trump. We can do better, and we'll work to persuade Democrats to choose a strong progressive nominee. Sanders and Warren, as well as their campaigns and supporters, will need to find ways to cooperate. The crossfire amplified by the media is unhelpful and does not reflect the relationship between two Senate colleagues who broadly worked well together for most of the last year. Okay, so notice what that totally omits, which is that Warren is the one who instigated this. Warren dropped the equivalent of a thermonuclear bomb onto Biden's candidacy, and yet these professional progressives want to get together and make it seem as though there's no culpability here. It's just evenly distributed among everybody who's involved. Everybody needs to chillax. It's just like, no, you're essentially misrepresenting this because you have your own objectives in mind. Anybody who can rationally and impartially assess what happened here understands what caused this. So why is Warren still viewed by these people as this staunch, quote unquote, progressive ally when she just committed the sleaziest and most egregious hit job in recent political memory against Bernie? Like, does that just not factor into how they assess the situation? No, again, and I'll keep repeating it. If you have a professional motivation here within the professional progressive movement, then you want to soothe over these tensions because you want the maximum number of job opportunities. And I'm sure there's a legitimate ideological motivation that animates some of it, but you can't overlook the fact that this is in their own career interests. So when these people calling for unity, what they're really accomplishing is to obscure how this conflict came about. And if you're more in the truth business than the political strategy business, which I like to think is more my cup of tea, then that just comes across as incredibly irritating. For one thing, Warren has made extremely conscious efforts over the past couple of months, and this is backed up by much reporting out there, to ingratiate herself with the Democratic establishment. So I don't even know how you can conceivably call her a non-establishment Democrat at this point. Her campaign is filled with all these careerist, insufferable operators who basically flowed to her from the Hillary campaign, from the Democratic establishment nonprofit world, from the Obama administration. See, these are the same people who are now fueling her campaign. So you're going to say that they're they would go to an anti-establishment candidate? Really? No, Warren just kind of puts a slightly more ostensibly anti-establishmentarian gloss on what is fundamentally an establishment project on her part. That's why she's doing these 11th hour attacks, emphasizing her identity, which is a total obsession amongst the liberal establishment that, oh, we have to placate every single identity group and we have to talk up how our membership to a certain gender or racial or religious or sexual orientation category means that we have some kind of special authority to pronounce on political issues. In the debate, Warren came prepared with a set of talking points about how the women are better at winning elections. And it's just like, I understand that it's not within Bernie's temperament to some extent to really go hard after Warren, right? But he could have easily said in that moment when Warren was like, yeah, I'm the only one here who beat an establishment, who beat an incumbent. I'm just watching it, so I'm getting distracted because I've seen it on the background. There's a Deval Patrick ad, which is like, why? But he has him locking arms with Obama on this ad. I hadn't seen it before. Anyway, when Warren was just like, nobody's on this stage has defeated an Republican in the past 30 years other than the women, me and Amy. Bernie could have just been like, hey, Liz, back when I was fighting against the Republicans, and again, this is just, even if you're a Republican, you could probably understand how this would be an effective retort, right? So this is not even really an ideological thing. It's more of a strategic thing. Bernie could have said in that moment, hey, Liz, back when I was fighting Republicans who were shipping jobs overseas and giving corporations everything they wanted in terms of trade deals and starting wars, I seem to recall that you were a Republican in the 90s meeting. So, like, during the time period when Warren says all these Democratic male candidates were failing to win elections against Republicans, Warren was herself a Republican. And it's just like, why doesn't that come up? So, I get that Bernie doesn't want to go into the mud, but that's not even really a sleazy attack. It's just true. And Bernie held his fire in 2016, as everybody can recall. He dismissed the obsession as he saw it with Hillary's emails, famously was saying, the American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails. And the point was never that he needed to dwell on the emails as such. It was that the entire email server scandal and the ensuing and the concomitant FBI investigation into Hillary's practices became a major electoral liability, such that it culminated with the Comey letter in late October, which Hillary now still blames for why she lost the election, of course, in addition to a variety of other factors that we could all rehearse till we're blue in the face, like Russia and sexism and whatever. So it wasn't. So it would have been perfectly legitimate for Bernie to talk about the email thing in 2016, and it's perfectly valid for him to go after Warren now. She tried to destroy his candidacy. Is there any indication that she's going to stop? She's going to say, you know what, that was all a mistake. We're going to spend the next 3 weeks just focusing on the issues. Are you kidding? I mean, they might pretend that they're doing that, but as this stunt shows, there are all kinds of ways that they can surreptitiously plant attacks using a subservient, incredulous media as a partner. And it's not as if it's I mean, they want to play nice with each other, and Bernie wants to play nice, right? I know you don't want to imitate Trump's tactics or whatever, but Trump won the Republican primary in 2016 when he was just viciously lashing into every single other Republican candidate. I mean, the guy he went the easiest on was probably Chris Christie, and he still at one point accused Christie of being complicit in a federal criminal conspiracy. So it's just like, doesn't recent political events have any insight into how this stuff works? And I know that the Republican primary process is not necessarily transferable to the Democratic primary process in terms of the insights and lessons you can glean, but still, go back to the 2008 Democratic race, which got brutal between Obama and Hillary. I tweeted this earlier, but on the debate stage in 2008, Obama said to Hillary, quote, "Well, I was working on those streets," meaning the south side of Chicago, "watching those folks see their jobs shipped overseas. You were a corporate lawyer sitting on the board of Walmart." Did that hurt Obama? No, he won the nomination. It was an effective attack. And it was in response to attacks that Hillary had been leveling at Obama. So I just don't see how this insistence on playing nice on the part of Bernie and some in his circle is sustainable. I mean, at a certain point, you have to fight back, I would think. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll sweep the early primary states and this won't matter. But at least now, I just think it shows a certain level of naivete to not feel like you have to engage whatsoever with somebody who is attempting to nuke your entire candidacy. I mean, do you think Trump's going to play nice with you? Do you think he's going to not throw everything under the sun at you? Now, yeah, this is a primary, so the dynamics are different, but still, it's a fallacy to assume that a heated primary is necessarily bad. I mean, the Republican primary in 2016 was incredibly heated. They ended up fighting over their respective penis sizes. Right? And yet, what happened ultimately? It animated the Republican base and it galvanized them and enabled them to win an electoral college victory. And the same thing was true in 2008. If the primary in 2008 hadn't been as extended as it was, meaning Hillary and Obama contested basically every state until the very end. And if the primary had ended prematurely, say if it had ended in, let's say, February rather than June of that year, then there's a very good chance, and I've long thought this, and I've actually had people in prominent Democratic circles agree with me on this. If the primary hadn't been as long as it was, Obama would not have ultimately won Indiana in the general election. So Obama won Indiana, which was a solid Republican state in 2008. And it's now gone back to solidly red. So he lost it in 2012 and Hillary lost it in 2016 by a wide margin. But he did win it, surprisingly, in 2008. And that was because he built up a campaign infrastructure in Indiana very early on and registered new voters, changed the political composition of the state. And all that happened because they had a heated and contested primary that went on quite long. So it's just ridiculous to say that mixing it up with your rivals harms the ultimate nominee. I don't think there's really good evidence of that. And even if it does happen around the margins, I mean, it's just kind of the right thing to do, I think. I mean, Warren has, as somebody says in the comments, she's kind of exposed herself as a snake. And it's funny to me that you have people on Twitter saying it's sexist to call a woman a snake. I've even seen men saying this because they want to be good allies. What? They're saying it's sexist to call Warren a snake because that's a sexist trope that dates back to the Garden of Eden. I don't think the Garden of Eden thing actually ever happened. Sorry to get into my fedora wearing atheist mode, but first of all, the Book of Genesis is not real. And either way, just like, really? So could you call her a rat? Could you call her a mole? Is there some other animal that it's acceptable to liken her to? It's just insane. I would not hesitate for 1 second to call a male who has engaged in treachery a snake. And it's funny to me how these people resort to knee-jerk sexism mode in order to deflect from real criticism to their candidate. So, yeah, I'm going to check for some super chats here. Got to at some point figure out a better way to collate my super chats because they just kind of fling by and I don't always see them immediately. I've been told there's like an option you can click on. Okay, somebody says, super chat says, progressive has been co-opted. Joe and Liz say the progressive Dem socials will never be co-opted by these neolibs. Remember what happened in 2016? There was a couple of weeks where the big debate between Bernie and Hillary was who's the real progressive. Hillary said that I'm a progressive who gets things done. And what did that mean? It entailed Hillary in one of the dumbest moments of the campaign tweeting out on her official account an intersectionality chart about how all these oppressed groups have interlocking interests, right? And that was supposed to be very impressive to the 1% of Democratic primary voters who are graduates of like Oberlin and Sarah Lawrence College, but for everybody else, it's just totally incoherent. So that was how Hillary tried to present her progressivism, and Warren's doing it now to some extent by again catering to every single identity group. And it's not as though Bernie doesn't cater to identity groups, but he just doesn't make it his focus. It's not like the beating heart of his campaign, where it's like now every other day you'll see Warren saying how much she centers Black women and stuff. And I don't mind giving focus and emphasis to the specific concerns of Black women. But number one, Black women are not a monolith, so it's a little bit condescending to kind of cast them as this totally homogenous group. But Bernie's, but you can cater to their cater to their interests by saying they have the same economic needs as everybody, regardless of race or gender, and that's just sort of what has always fueled Bernie's political vision. You know, if you read the CNN article, and I think I've mentioned this on a live stream before, or I mentioned it somewhere else, I'm losing track. Maybe I need to, I don't know, take more supplements or something to keep my memory straight. But in the CNN article that kind of constituted this quote unquote bombshell, what was also relayed was that Warren objected to Bernie saying that he was frustrated with how the Democratic Party seemed like it was overly fixated on identity concerns. So Warren disagreed with that as well. And she's sure making that known as she campaigns now. I was talking to somebody recently who had to deal with the Warren campaign in terms of organizing an event. And the person told me how just utterly annoyed they were with everybody who was in the campaign, because they were all these sort of predictably careerist, upwardly mobile, college graduate, largely females, I have to say, but some males who just represent everything that they dislike about the modern Democratic Party. And those are the people who are kind of dictating the nature of the Warren campaign. So this is no surprise that it would have resulted in such a blowout around sexism stuff. Karen says, ugh, no animal is treacherous except humans. Call her a damn human because that's what fits. I sympathize in a way with not maligning animals who are all inherently virtuous, I guess. But, you know, the English language takes on certain metaphorical connotations that even if you object because you're an animal rights person, I don't know that you should necessarily say that it constitutes sexism. And of course, meanwhile, we have the Senate trial for impeachment underway. I'm sort of half watching it right now on CNN, sort of interesting historic moment. I'm assuming that Chief Justice John Roberts is about to waltz into the chamber right now and kick things off. I will remind you that the only Democratic candidate who said that this would be a total fiasco was always Tulsi, who, of course, took a huge amount of abuse for it. But I think she will be borne out as having sound judgment. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Should be interesting to see what happens when Bernie and Warren and Amy have to go off the campaign trail. I'm not even going to mention Michael Bennet because he's hardly even running at this point, but he also is a senator who's going to be a juror in this trial. But, you know, the four of them are going to have to be in D.C. for an extended period of time dealing with this impeachment trial, which is like the worst timing ever. Does it hurt them? Does it help Biden? I don't know. But lots of uncertainty as Iowa approaches. And in Tulsi news, I think people might be a little surprised at her performance in New Hampshire, especially because she's attracting a very heterodox set of supporters, pretty evenly distributed in what I've seen across former Trump supporters, libertarians, some like dissenting Democrats, and slightly alienated Bernie people who don't necessarily appreciate the ways in which his campaign changed between 2016 and 2020. So, are all those people being picked up sufficiently by the polls? I don't know. It's possible, but there's a very good. I think there's a decent chance that Tulsi overperforms relative to what people would have expected of her. And in these early states, when there aren't that many actual delegates at stake, expectations, which is really just sort of a media creation, but nonetheless, expectations are actually pretty significant. Okay, gonna leave it there for now. Got some other stuff to do. Go watch, as somebody just mentioned in the comments, the discussion that Tulsi had on the debate night. Especially if you were disgusted with the debate itself, as I think all thinking people should be, bear in mind that there was another event happening in another state that Tulsi hosted with Dennis Kucinich, Stephen Kinzer, and Larry Lessig on Iran and the history of U.S. regime change. It seems like Tulsi's rhetoric on these issues has gotten much clearer and much more, I don't want to say radical, but much more incisive in its critique as the campaign has progressed, which is heartening. Okay, I will talk to you later.